Stephanie Meyer's twinkly vampire phase or era is now officially over. Thank God we have Southern Gothic. Alright class, settle down and let me tell you a story. Yes, I'm already late for the party, but as a fan of Bram Stoker and Anne Rice, I believe it would be a great injustice not to make a video out of it, since this channel has always been and will always be about stories. But before we check it out, please like, share, subscribe, do the whole notification button thing to help me out with the algo, and here we go. Guys, I know I am so sorry. We have been off schedule because it's always been one thing after another, but I promise I'm doing everything I can to get everything back on track. So check this out. Thanks to Sinner, we now have a new vampire meta under the American Southern Gothic team with an Irish vampire at the helm. Stephanie Meyer's Twinkly Fairy's phase is over. Before her, there was Anne Rice and Bram Stoker. You know, the original like his Eastern European manly men, Romanian, inspired by Vlad Tepes, Vlad Dracul, hard men, hard lives, militaristic. Whereas Madame Rice liked her European mainland femboys. You've got the French twink Lestat and sad boy Louis. So why don't we check this one out? Awesome film, by the way. I recommend that you guys watch it. You know what? It's been what? The film's over what? 2 months old now. It's no longer my fault if you still haven't seen it. Okay, so spoiler warning.
Out.
Ah.
Don't cry. It's all better now.
One of the major mysteries of the Sinners movie was the fact that we never got to learn more about Remmick's backstory. Jack O'Connell portrayed that character to perfection.
Jack O'Connell, I believe he played, is it over? SAS Rogue Heroes. I'm not sure if that series is over, but yeah, he's the one he's Major Paddy Man.
And that's why people are so compelled to discover what really happened to him. Why did he become a vampire? Who turned him? What is his true agenda? What about his Choctaw rivalry, secrets, and even more shocking revelations? Let's begin. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel.
Yeah,
this
you
is
know
a
the
small
drill,
click for
guys.
you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Origins of an Irish vampire. Remmick stands apart from traditional vampire villains through his specific cultural identity as an Irish immigrant.
So, Irish immigrant, I believe it's one of the things that makes him unique. Because we've always seen vampires as one after the other. You've got mindless monsters, and then you've got the European seducers under Anne Rice, and then you've got the traditional Eastern European vampires under Bram Stoker. This one looks awesome. I mean, I wonder who turned him or how he got turned.
O'Connell revealed that Remmick's life spans an astonishing 600 to 700 years, placing his human origins in 13th or 14th century Ireland, a period of intense upheaval under British colonial rule. Remmick's
So he's not that old.
transformation into a vampire in Sinners is deeply rooted in the systemic oppression of the Irish under British rule, which shaped his identity, desperation, and ultimate rejection of humanity. To understand his turn to vampirism, we must examine the socio-political and cultural violence of medieval Ireland. The Anglo-Norman invasion.
So that's always been a thing. That's always been a theme. There's even a footage and a shot of Cillian Murphy. Do you pronounce it Killian or Cillian? Can someone please put it down in the comments? Or can someone please put a link in the comments as to how his name is pronounced? If I'm not mistaken, he did a recent I'm not sure if he reprised his role in the 28 years later franchise. They apparently the director or someone confirmed that it was him, that skinny guy in the trailer walking. But anyways, can someone please put down a link if it's pronounced Cillian or Cillian Murphy? Anyways, there's a snapshot of him. Sorry, went off on a whole tangent there. There's a snapshot of him with his hands in his pocket when meeting the British royalty. I can't if it was Harry or George or whatever. Because apparently the British royal family before then, or the British government, declared that all men found in Ireland with their hands in their pockets will be shot. So there are a lot of Irishmen right now that every time there's a function or when they meet British royalty or British government officials, they put their hand in their pockets as a symbol of their defiance against their oppression or ancestral oppression.
Of 1169 to 1171 marked the beginning of centuries of British domination as Henry II declared himself Lord of Ireland and imposed feudal systems that displaced Gaelic clans. For Remmick, born into this era, his Irish identity would have been under constant assault. British policies deliberately marginalised the Irish language, banning it from legal, educational and public spheres. This erasure of linguistic heritage, a core element of Irish identity, likely
Not many popular movies in this, but if you guys want to check out how the whole thing worked when the English were expanding northwards, Mel Gibson's Braveheart, Prima Nocta.
left Remmick alienated, a theme mirrored in his later appropriation of black blues to fill this cultural void. The Statutes of Kilkenny, 1367, further
Check this out, Statutes of Kilkenny, definitely worth a Google.
institutionalized segregation, forbidding Anglo-Normans from
There we go.
adopting Irish customs.
So the Kilkenny Statutes is basically their version of apartheid.
Language, or intermarriage. As a Gaelic Irishman, Remmick would have faced dehumanisation, reinforcing his sense of otherness. The 14th century brought catastrophic famines, for example, 1315 to 1319, exacerbated by British extractive policies. For Remmick, these crises may have been personal. Historical records describe how famine and British land confiscations displaced Gaelic families, pushing them.
Wait, if this was the 18th century and he was already over 600 years old, something's off. I mean, of course, this was during early 19 you've got early 19th century, early 20th century. So if we count back when the upheavals were happening, when the potato famine was happening, he was already a vampire because it would have been during the medieval ages when he turned into a vampire. We're getting to see this theme that he might have made a deal. That's the same story as Vlad Tepes, Vlad Dracul. That's the same theme that, he made a deal with the devil in order to save his country or in order to fight against his oppressors.
Into subsistence farming on marginal lands. If Remmick's family perished during this period, starved or killed in conflicts, it would explain his later obsession with resurrecting them through Sammy's music. The Anglo-Norman elite monopolised fertile lands, reducing native Irish to tenant farmers. This economic subjugation likely stripped Remmick of autonomy, making vampirism's promise of eternal agency irresistible. The Bruce invasion, 1315 to 1318, exemplifies the violent resistance to British rule. Edward Bruce's campaign, supported by Gaelic lords like Domhnall O'Neill, sought to overthrow English dominance but ended in massacre.
So at this point in time, he could have fought in this particular war or uprising. He might have turned into a vampire at this point in time.
Remmick's backstory hints at similar rebellion. If Remmick participated in uprisings against Norman lords only to witness their brutal suppression, his turn to vampirism could symbolise a darker form of defiance, abandoning mortality to outlast his oppressors. By the 14th century, Irish clans reclaimed territories through guerrilla tactics. Remmick's vampiric abilities, flight, superhuman strength, mirror this resurgence, granting him power to retaliate against colonial forces that once rendered him powerless. The cumulative trauma of cultural erasure, economic despair, and political violence would fracture Remmick's humanity. Facing a life of subjugation, vampirism offered immortality,
So he could have been facing that, or he could have turned out of spite at a certain point, because it's easy to put down a rebellion. His form or his version of the rebellion could have been easily put down, and he could have simply been hunting Englishmen for out of spite at this point.
literal and metaphorical escape from British-inflicted suffering. As actor Jack O'Connell noted, Remmick's vampiric existence became a means to live forever by adhering to supernatural rules, a stark contrast to the arbitrary brutality of colonial law. His later performance of Irish folk music in Sinazar, blend of defiance and manipulation, reflects how British oppression hollowed his cultural identity, turning it into a tool for predation rather than connection. Though much of his human life remains shrouded in mystery, the film hints that he once had a family, perhaps a wife and children, whose brutal deaths at the hands of human or vampire hunters catalyzed his transformation into an immortal predator. In a scene, he performs the traditional folk song The Rocky Road to Dublin before leading his followers in an eerie dance.
Hold on, Rocky Road to Dublin? Let's see when that folk song was written. Let me check. 19th century Irish song written by Irish poet D.K. Gavin. About a man's experience as he travels to Liverpool, England from his home in Tuam. He arrives in the English city of Liverpool, where he is mocked by the locals because of his nationality. Losing his temper, he engages them in a fight. His blackthorn shillelagh, that weapon thing, popularized by that WWE wrestler. What was the name of that WWE wrestler? Or the shillelagh? Oh my god, I used to like him so much. But he's outnumbered until a group of Irishmen from Galloway come to his rescue, join in the affray. The first people who helped him on his trip. So yeah, it's an Irish folk song that's meant to provide defiance against their oppressors.
Performance reveals an authentic connection to his heritage and underscores the bitter irony of an Irishman now preying on another oppressed people, Black Mississippians in the Jim Crow South.
That is ironic.
The transformation from human to vampire. While the film never explicitly depicts Remmick's turning, contextual clues and interviews with O'Connell illuminate how he became undead. Given his centuries-long timeline, Remmick's transformation likely occurred in late medieval Ireland, perhaps during one of the many conflicts between Irish clans or between Irish rebels and English forces. One prevailing theory suggests that, in desperation to escape relentless oppression or personal tragedy, he accepted vampirism as a dark salvation. Coogler crafted an elaborate vampire mythos for the film, though much remains off-screen. O'Connell noted that the director kept details of Remmick's origin under wraps, ensuring the character's mystery persisted. What is clear is that Remmick follows a strict set of unspoken rules enabling his immortality, which he guards jealously, an indication that a master vampire elsewhere may have guided his initial transformation, but either died or disappeared, leaving Remmick to forge his own path. Master Vampire Concept, a vampire overlord. Above Remmick, the concept of a shadowy master vampire orchestrating global vampiric proliferation through agents like Remmick aligns with Sinners.
I mean, the question would be who made him. To my mind, or at least, under this particular theory, he was an Irish rebel who turned to vampirism in order to exact vengeance upon his enemies. The question is, someone needed to convince him to travel all the way, to the New World. Or B, he was found out that he was a vampire and now he needed to run, or he needed to escape Ireland.
Thematic critique of systemic exploitation, though the film itself leaves this hierarchy ambiguous. If such a figure exists, their agenda could mirror historical colonial enterprises, using localized agents to destabilize communities, harvest cultural or spiritual resources, and expand their influence. Remmick's Irish origins and 600-year timeline suggest he might have been turned during Britain's medieval colonization of Ireland, positioning him as a mid-tier enforcer in a vampiric empire that preys on marginalized.
So we're now bordering on the same story as Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, where vampires were trying to turn the US into, their killing fields or their cow fields, or they needed to proliferate slavery so they'd have an endless supply of human chattel.
Groups worldwide. I said
chattel, alright, not cattle.
Hypothetical master could operate akin to corporate franchising, empowering regional managers like Remmick to adapt vampirism to local traumas, for example, Irish famine survivors or Jim Crow-era Black Americans, while siphoning power upward. Such a theory gains traction when analysing Remmick's behaviour. His focus on appropriating Sammy's blues, a genre born from Black resistance,
I mean, that would make sense that since if you're a vampire, you the color of their skin or their history wouldn't matter. All that would matter is that they're also vampires. So you find an oppressed people or an oppressed or marginalized group, and you turn them into your henchmen, and where they will fight and die for you, just to get rid of all their old masters or their old oppressors.
hints at a larger pattern of cultural extraction. If Remmick answers to a higher power, this entity might demand tribute in the form of stolen artistry or spiritual energy, repurposing it to fuel their eternal dominance. The film's subtext about capitalism, underscored by Coogler's comparison of Marvel to vampires, supports this reading. The master vampire could symbolize globalized exploitation, with Remmick as a colonial-era branch manager, recruiting thralls to destabilize communities, much like corporate entities drain local economies. This framework also explains why Remmick fears the Choctaw hunters more than sunlight. Their ancestral knowledge might trace back to conflicts with the Master's earlier agents, suggesting a centuries-long war between indigenous resistance and vampiric colonialism.
Now there's something. During the Irish potato famine, I'm not sure if it was specifically the Choctaw tribe or the Native American nations in general. But during that particular point in time, they sent support to Ireland. So there could have been a connection there.
If proven, this theory would position Sinners as one chapter in a hidden history where
they might have had an exchange program since both people looked at themselves as oppressed and therefore needed to help each other out.
the vampires serve as both literal monsters and metaphors for extractive power structures, a hierarchy stretching back to feudal Europe and replicating itself through proxies like Remmick in every era of oppression. Centuries of wandering, Remmick's arrival in America. After his emergence as a vampire, Remmick appears to have wandered the globe for centuries before settling in America. The film teases his American exploits through vintage newspapers, dated 1911, 1924, and 1932, each linking unexplained tragedies to his presence. These tantalizing
where did he get those dates?
Crumbs suggest that by the
Can someone please put it down in the comments? Where did he get those dates?
the early 20th century, Remmick had already honed his predatory craft in the New World. His facility for adaptation is among his most chilling traits. Able to blend into new environments and manipulate local cultures, he survives through the centuries by preying on fear, leveraging local myths, and exploiting societal rifts. In 1932, Mississippi, he seamlessly infiltrates the black community's juke joint scene, posing as an ally against white supremacists while secretly hunting for the spiritual power he craves. Jack O'Connell's own background in Irish dance lent crucial authenticity to Remmick's performances. In interviews,
there was an interview about him doing this as a kid, being trained in Irish dance and river dancing.
O'Connell shared how his secret passion for traditional dancing enabled him to embody Remmick's centuries-old mastery of movement, making each scene feel both rooted in folklore and, unsettlingly, otherworldly. The Choctaw Connection, a history of conflict. One of Sinner's most intriguing dynamics is the Choctaw tribe's determined pursuit of Remmick. In the film's opening moments, he flees through daylight when vampires are most vulnerable, confronted not by the sun but by Choctaw hunters whose knowledge of his weaknesses terrifies him more than daylight's burn. A compelling theory posits that Remmick once encountered a Choctaw spiritual leader whose gifts echoed those of Sammy, the young blues musician at the heart of the film. watchalong. That previous exploitation ended in bloodshed and lasting enmity, explaining the tribe's relentless expertise in vampire hunting and their tactical retreats at sunset. This theory is enriched by the real-world historical bond between the Irish and the Choctaw. During Ireland's Great Famine, the Choctaw sent aid to starving Irish families, forging a rare cross-cultural solidarity. Remmick's betrayal of this solidarity, using Choctaw...
If I'm not mistaken, the Irish potato famine was sometime around the 1840s. So, if he wandered the globe, does that mean he was back in Ireland during this time? He could have been traveling all this time, or he could have already been to the US, or he could have used this particular connection to get into the US.
Hospitality as a means to exploit their spirituality deepens the tragic irony of his character. The power of music, Remmick's spiritual hunger. Arguably, Remmick's defining trait is his profound fixation on music as a source of spiritual power. Unlike conventional vampires driven solely by bloodlust, he craves the ancestral essence embedded in African American blues, a potent blend of grief, resilience, and communal memory. Sammy's transcendent performances, which literally draw spirits to the juke joint, enthrall Remmick, who believes Sammy's voice can resurrect his own long-lost family. This obsession elevates Sinners above typical horror fare. Director Ryan Coogler has spoken passionately about the parallels between Irish folk music and black blues, both traditions emerging from oppression, both vehicles of cultural survival. Remmick weaponizes that shared history, whereas Sammy's music brings healing and unity. Remmick's appropriation of it becomes a form of cultural vampirism, draining community strength to feed his own loneliness.
That would be a difference. I remember I had this professor. He did this, he juxtaposed Professor Xavier and then Magneto, right, from X-Men. Both young men, roughly the same, not really the same age. I think Magneto was older. Anyways, here's the thing. It's how they, the juxtaposition was all about how they try to achieve their goals or their objectives. Of course, Magneto was the more violent type, whereas Professor Xavier wanted peace. But the main distinction between them, I believe, that's why he was wrong, or at least, I didn't agree with my professor, is that if you compare Magneto and Xavier, Magneto was a victim. He literally went through the Jewish concentration camps provided by the Nazis. Whereas, well, Xavier was a rich kid. He was a rich boy who had an easy life. Magneto believes that it was going. That's why he fought so hard against the humans. That's why he won. That he was going to. He was in favor of a preemptive strike against the humans. Was because he believed that this time it was going to happen again. At first, it was against the Jews, then by the Nazis. Now he believes it's going to be the humans versus the mutants. He believed that humans are going to basically take them back to the camps again. Whereas Xavier lived a rich kid life. All right, so if we do the same metaphor here, if we juxtapose them both, if we compare these two as to how they grew up, Remmick was both men were born under systematized oppression. Remmick actually fought. He was actually part of the rebellion. Whereas our blues singer, whose name I can't remember right now, I'm so sorry. Our blues singer, despite the fact that, yes, he's living under systematized oppression, he's living under the Jim Crow South, similar to the Kilkenny statutes, the thing is, it can be said that he's had an easier life compared to Remmick. Right? Because the mere fact that he has a spare time to go out with his cousins to a juke joint says a lot. Whereas compared to Remmick during late medieval England's oppression or invasion of Ireland, it was definitely going to be hell compared to the Jim Crow South. So I believe that despite the fact that yes, these two men lived under systematic oppression, there is a mile of distinction, or there's a difference. There's a miles of difference between how they lived. I believe Remmick's version was worse because it was medieval England, and whereas their singer, the singer, whose name I can't remember, he literally has a spare time to, well, go to parties with his cousins. Whereas Remmick probably never had that. Anyways, let's keep on going.
Cultural vampire concept. Remmick transcends the familiar Dracula
There we go.
archetype of foreign aristocrat. He is the monster already among us, charming and persuasive, representing modern anxieties around cultural appropriation. One analysis likens him to a gentrifier. He loves the culture but ignores the people who created it, reducing rich traditions to extractable commodities. His strategy is insidious. He uses shared histories of marginalization to position himself as an ally, then betrays those he claims to protect. In the film, he attempts to recruit survivors of a clan attack with the promise of immortality and refuge, turning communal trauma into a Faustian bargain. Through Remmick, Sinners interrogates how exploitation can masquerade as solidarity and how art, music, in this case, can become a battleground for cultural power. Remmick stands among the most nuanced screen vampires in recent memory. By grounding his predation in specific histories,
Stephanie Meyer's twinkly vampire phase or era is now officially over. Thank God we have Southern Gothic.
medieval Irish colonialism, Native American solidarity, Jim Crow oppression, Coogler crafts a villain whose terror is as much social as supernatural. Jack O'Connell's performance, informed by exhaustive discussions with Coogler, embodies 6 centuries of grief and rage, making Remmick both timeless and starkly contemporary. This brings us to the end of the video. If you liked the video, drop a subs for us and tell us your theory on Remmick. What is his backstory according to you? Be safe, be marvelous.
Bye! Thank you for watching, guys. So if you want me to check out other stories here on YouTube, please let me know in the comments. We upload on the weekends, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Also, check out our Twitch channel where you can watch me do this live. And please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, do the whole notification button thing to help me out with the algo, and class dismissed.